People often say that everyone at some point meets someone who leaves a lasting mark on their heart. For an avoidant person, though, that someone usually isn't the one who kept begging, chasing, or desperately asking them to stay. More often, it's the one who could walk away calmly without revenge, drama, or resentment. At some point, an avoidant might meet someone they just can't forget, and that person is rarely the one who kept working hard to win their attention. Instead, it's usually the one who knew their own worth and could step back without losing themselves in the process. That kind of quiet exit creates a different kind of awakening. Once the noise fades and no one is left trying to talk them into staying, the avoidant may finally start to understand what that person truly meant to them. Sometimes distance shows what closeness made them too afraid to see. What makes that possible is emotional safety, something far more powerful than non-stop texting or big displays of affection. Emotional safety is hard to spot, but people can sense it almost right away. It's that feeling that being close to someone won't automatically cost you your freedom, load you with pressure, or make you responsible for someone else's emotions. For an avoidant, this matters even more because closeness can trigger fears they don't fully understand themselves. You could remind them how much you care every single day and still make them uneasy if your emotions come across as heavy or demanding. But someone who speaks honestly while staying emotionally steady can offer a completely different kind of experience. Slowly, they start to see that connection doesn't have to feel like a trap. Love can exist without pressure, affection can exist without demands, and closeness can grow while both people keep their independence. Many avoidant people learned early on to link emotional closeness with uncertainty, conflict, or pain. Maybe affection was unpredictable, emotions swung wildly, or being vulnerable never felt safe growing up. Over time, their nervous system may have learned to treat emotional need as something risky. That's often why deep conversations, constant reassurance seeking, frequent checking in, or strong emotional outbursts can make them pull away. From the outside, it might look like they simply don't care. But underneath that behavior, there can be a deeply wired urge to create space whenever intimacy starts to feel like too much. That doesn't excuse hurtful actions, but it does help explain the pattern. The harder someone pushes for closeness or tries to prove their love, the more pressure the avoidant may feel. What feels like comfort to one person can feel like overload to another, especially when their instinct is to protect themselves by pulling back. Emotional safety doesn't mean shutting off your feelings, hiding what you need, or acting like nothing ever hurts. It means learning to feel your emotions without dumping the full weight of them onto someone else. There's a real difference between saying, "That hurt me, but I can handle what I'm feeling," and saying, "You need to make this feeling go away." The first is honest while still owning your own experience. The second, even without meaning to, puts pressure on the other person. When you stay steady while still expressing yourself, you show that disagreement doesn't have to spiral into chaos. You prove that someone can let you down without facing punishment for it, and that you can feel things deeply without being swallowed whole by the relationship. For an avoidant, that kind of experience can slowly chip away at an old belief, the idea that closeness always comes attached to demands. Instead, they start to see a different kind of relationship unfold, one where love has room to breathe and neither person has to disappear to stay connected. Something big shifts once your peace of mind stops depending on what the avoidant decides to do next. You stop spending every waking moment wondering if they'll text back, come around, pick you, or finally give you the reassurance you've been craving. Your focus starts turning back toward yourself. You grow steadier, less reactive, and less tied to their actions for your own emotional balance. That shift can be more powerful than it sounds, because avoidant people often pick up on emotional pressure even when nothing is ever said out loud. When your energy softens, they may notice that you're no longer trying to reel them in or steer the outcome. You're just there, without giving up your own life in the process. And that creates something they may secretly crave, stability without suffocation. They start to understand that being near you doesn't mean surrendering their identity, freedom, or personal space. Here's the deeper truth. Plenty of avoidant people want closeness, while also fearing everything closeness seems to bring with it. They can crave connection and still feel uncomfortable the moment someone gets too near. They can miss a person and still resist reaching out to them. They can care deeply while still convincing themselves that distance is the safer choice. That's exactly why emotional steadiness matters more than grand declarations of love. When you stop trying to prove your worth to them, you give them the chance to experience you without any pressure to react a certain way. Your calm says something words alone rarely can. You're free to be who you are, and I'm still secure in who I am. That message can slowly wear down their defenses. Instead of feeling like closeness will swallow them whole, they might start discovering that connection and independence can actually live side by side. That's when trust gets the room it needs to grow naturally, instead of being forced through endless reassurance or chasing. There's also a real difference between walking away to manipulate someone and walking away because you genuinely respect yourself. An avoidant might eventually notice you're gone, but that should never be the reason you leave. The point isn't to vanish so they panic, get jealous, or come running. The point is to stop feeding a dynamic that keeps draining your emotional peace. When you step back out of real self-respect, you're not trying to spark a reaction. You're simply choosing peace over confusion. And that honesty is exactly what gives your absence meaning. They may start to notice that the person who once offered warmth, understanding, and consistency isn't standing at the door waiting anymore. Without someone constantly chasing them, they're left alone with their own thoughts and feelings. And sometimes that quiet gives them realizations that pressure never could. This is why trying harder isn't always the answer when you're dealing with someone who has avoidant patterns. More texts don't automatically bring more closeness. More explaining doesn't automatically create understanding. Proving your loyalty over and over won't force someone to feel comfortable with intimacy before they're ready. Sometimes the healthiest move is turning your attention back to your own life. Build up your confidence, reinforce your boundaries, spend time with people who make you feel seen and valued. Let yourself live a full life that doesn't hinge on whether someone decides to move closer or drift further away. Once you become emotionally grounded, you stop chasing love out of desperation and start choosing it instead. That shift changes everything. You're no longer saying, "Please pick me because I need you." You're showing through your actions, "I care about you, but I won't lose myself trying to hold on to you." And that's often the exact point where things start to shift. Once the pressure lifts, the avoidant may finally have the emotional room to notice what the connection really felt like. They might remember the moments they felt understood instead of judged, accepted instead of controlled, close without ever feeling trapped. They may start comparing that feeling to other relationships or people and realize that emotional safety isn't as easy to find as they once thought. But remember, none of this guarantees that an avoidant will come back or suddenly become emotionally available. People have to make their own choices and take responsibility for their own patterns. What you can control is the environment you build within yourself. You can become someone who doesn't chase love, beg for consistency, or trade away personal dignity for a bit of temporary closeness. You can become calm enough to love without clinging and strong enough to walk away when a relationship keeps failing to meet your needs. Real connection isn't built through pressure, emotional games, or endless attempts to prove you're worth choosing. It grows when two people can stay true to themselves while slowly letting each other in. If you're dealing with someone who pulls away every time intimacy grows, remember, it's not your job to rescue them from their own fears. You can't regulate someone else's nervous system for them, and you should never have to shrink your needs just to make another person feel comfortable. What you can do is speak clearly, hold healthy boundaries, and stay grounded in your own sense of worth. If they eventually realize what they lost, let that realization be theirs to carry. Your job isn't to sit around waiting for their awakening. Your job is to keep growing more secure, more peaceful, and more rooted in yourself. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can give someone isn't another explanation. It's the quiet proof that you know how to love deeply without losing yourself in the process. If there's one thing to take from everything we've covered, it's this. You were never meant to spend your life convincing someone to see your value. You were never meant to chase someone into loving you, explain yourself over and over, or keep lowering your standards just to make someone else comfortable with closeness. Love shouldn't require you to vanish inside another person's fears. And if you've been dealing with an avoidant person, this matters even more because their distance can make you question everything about yourself. You might start wondering if you were too emotional, too available, too caring, or somehow not enough. But someone else's struggle to accept closeness doesn't automatically mean something was wrong with what you gave. Sometimes the deepest mistake is believing their discomfort with intimacy says anything about your worth. An avoidant person can genuinely care about you and still struggle to stay close. They can miss you and still go quiet. They can think about you constantly and still refuse to reach out. They can know how much you matter and still get scared the moment things start feeling emotionally real. These contradictions can feel confusing because we naturally assume feelings should lead to action. If someone loves us, we expect them to move closer. If they miss us, we expect a message. If they know they hurt us, we expect an apology. But human behavior doesn't always work that cleanly. Fear, conditioning, emotional defenses, and old unresolved patterns can all get in the way of what someone actually feels. That's why you should never measure your worth by the actions of someone who may not even know how to handle their own emotions. Their inner conflict belongs to them. It doesn't become your job just because you were close enough to see it happening. And this is where your own transformation really begins. Instead of constantly asking, "How do I get them to come back?" start asking, "Why was I so willing to abandon myself just to keep them close?" That question leads somewhere much deeper, because sometimes what you're really attached to isn't just the person, it's the hope that one day they'll finally give you the validation you've been quietly waiting for. You picture the message arriving, you picture the apology, you picture them suddenly understanding everything you felt, you picture them realizing you were different from everyone else. There's nothing wrong with hoping for something healthier, but you have to be careful not to build your whole emotional future around an imagined version of someone. You can't live in peace while you're waiting for someone else's emotional awakening. The strongest version of you isn't the one who knows how to make an avoidant chase after them. It's the one who no longer needs anyone to chase at all. That's a completely different kind of strength. It means your confidence stops depending on whether someone notices you're gone. Your self-worth stops rising when they text and dropping when they vanish. You stop spending hours studying their social media, wondering what every silence means, trying to decode every small shift in their mood. You stop mistaking uncertainty for love. You stop confusing emotional inconsistency with emotional depth, and slowly, something inside you settles. You realize love can be meaningful without being confusing. Attraction can be powerful without being painful, and connection can feel exciting without leaving you anxious about where you stand. That's the kind of emotional freedom worth working toward. Not becoming cold, not becoming distant, not pretending you don't care. Emotional freedom means caring without disappearing into someone else. It means being able to say, I love you, but I also love who I am when I'm not chasing you. It means being able to miss someone without reaching out just to calm your own anxiety. It means accepting that someone may not have the capacity to give you what you need, without turning that into a personal rejection. You can understand someone's wounds without signing up to be hurt by them. You can feel compassion for their past without excusing behavior that keeps hurting you now. And you can accept that their fear of closeness is real, while still deciding you deserve a relationship where closeness isn't something you have to fight for. This is where boundaries matter so much. Boundaries aren't punishments. They're not threats meant to scare an avoidant into changing. They're not some manipulative trick to make someone afraid of losing you. A real boundary is simply a decision about what you will and won't take part in. If someone keeps disappearing the moment things get emotionally close, you're allowed to decide that pattern no longer works for you. If someone won't communicate, you're allowed to stop carrying the whole relationship on your own. If someone only shows up when they're lonely and vanishes the moment you need consistency, you're allowed to step back. You don't need anyone's permission to protect your peace, and you don't need to convince someone your boundary makes sense. The right person won't necessarily agree with every boundary you set, but they'll respect that you're allowed to set them. Sometimes walking away isn't the end of love. Sometimes it's the beginning of self-respect. And there's a huge difference between leaving to make someone panic and leaving because you've finally accepted the truth. If you disappear hoping it'll make an avoidant chase you, you're still emotionally tied to their reaction. You're still letting their behavior steer your inner world. But when you walk away because you recognize the relationship isn't healthy for you anymore, something shifts. You're no longer performing an action to get a result. You're choosing yourself. That's why real detachment carries so much power. It doesn't say, I hope you regret losing me. It says, I hope you find peace, and I'm going to go find mine too. There's no revenge hiding in that, just acceptance. And if they do come back one day, don't automatically assume it means everything has changed. Missing someone isn't the same as being ready for a healthy relationship. Regret isn't the same as growth. Loneliness isn't the same as commitment. Someone can miss you deeply and still repeat the exact same behavior that hurt you before. So if an avoidant eventually reaches out, don't focus only on what they say. Pay close attention to what they consistently do. Are they opening up more in how they communicate? Are they owning their part? Are they respecting the boundaries you've set? Are they willing to sit through hard conversations instead of vanishing? Do they stay consistent once the initial excitement wears off? Are they making space for what you need instead of expecting you to keep adjusting to them? These are the things that actually matter. Words can spark hope, but it's steady behavior that builds real trust. You should never go back just because you miss the version of them you were hoping they'd become. Go back only if the relationship itself has truly changed enough to earn another chance. Otherwise, you might end up repeating the same cycle, just with a new beginning that leads to the exact same ending. That first stage feels thrilling because they're back. You feel relief wash over you. You start believing things might finally be different this time. Then closeness builds. Their old discomfort creeps back in. Communication starts fading. And suddenly you're standing right back in the same emotional spot you swore you'd never return to. This is exactly why healing takes more than just waiting for someone to come back. You also need to understand your own patterns. Ask yourself what made inconsistency feel so addictive in the first place. Ask why uncertainty sometimes felt stronger than stability ever did. Ask why you were willing to settle for crumbs while hoping they'd eventually turn into a full meal. There's nothing shameful about realizing you stayed longer than you should have. You stayed because you cared. You stayed because you believed in what you two had. You stayed because you saw potential. You stayed because certain moments were beautiful enough to convince you the hard moments were only temporary. But healing means learning to tell potential apart from reality. What someone could be isn't the same as what they're actually capable of. Someone's feelings for you don't automatically mean they can build a real relationship with you. Someone's trauma might explain their behavior, but it doesn't mean you're obligated to keep absorbing the fallout forever. You can understand why someone acts a certain way and still decide you can't keep living inside that pattern. Compassion and boundaries aren't opposites. They can exist together. Maybe the biggest lesson here is that emotional safety has to start with you. You can't build lasting safety with someone else while you're constantly living in fear of losing them. You can't offer calm, peaceful love while your nervous system is bracing for the next pullback. You can't create real connection by abandoning your own needs every time someone drifts away. The first safe relationship you actually need to build is the one you have with yourself. You need to become someone you can count on, someone who doesn't disappear from their own life just because another person turned distant, someone who can sit with uncertainty without immediately chasing reassurance, someone who can feel rejected without concluding they're worthless, someone who can love deeply while still holding on to their identity, friendships, goals, routines, and boundaries. Once you become that person, your entire experience of relationships shifts. Instead of asking, "Do they want me?" you start asking, "Is this relationship actually good for me?" That one shift alone can change everything about how you choose. You stop focusing only on whether someone finds you attractive, interesting, special, or impossible to forget. You start considering whether they're even capable of meeting you emotionally. You stop trying to earn your spot in someone's life and start noticing whether they're actually building a healthy space for you. You stop begging for clarity and start recognizing that ongoing confusion is often an answer all on its own. You stop chasing potential and start responding to what's real. And what's real, even when it hurts, is always easier to work with than a fantasy. Maybe the avoidant will eventually understand what they lost. Maybe someday they'll look back and realize you gave them something rare. Maybe they'll remember your patience, your warmth, the conversations you shared, the moments they finally felt truly understood. Maybe your absence will force them to face feelings they were able to dodge while you were still around. That's possible, but you can't make that the reason you heal. Because if your healing depends on their regret, you're still waiting for them to hand you something. You're still letting them hold the final piece of your closure, and your closure was never meant to belong to someone else.